The night had been tense from the very beginning. The silence between them was not ordinary silence. It was thick, heavy, and laced with emotions that no one dared to put into words. Bai Lu sat rigid in her seat, her fingers gripping the edge of the couch, as though letting go meant surrendering everything she had fought for. Dylan stood nearby, restless, pacing with a look that betrayed the storm he carried inside. Shen Yue lingered by the doorway, her eyes fixed on Dylan with an unreadable expression, the kind of gaze that could shatter or heal depending on what followed. The atmosphere felt almost unreal, as if the air itself carried secrets. Bai Lu had been asked to leave earlier, not once but twice, yet she stayed rooted, her eyes glistening with determination. Her refusal was not defiance for the sake of pride, it was desperation, a fear of walking away and never being able to return. She looked at Dylan as if her presence alone would anchor him, but his restlessness only grew. Shen Yue's silence cut sharper than any accusation. She had not spoken, not really, but her quiet composure spoke louder than shouts. Bai Lu finally broke the stillness, her voice trembling but fierce. She said she would not move, not until Dylan chose, not until he looked her in the eyes and gave her an answer. The room seemed to shrink with her words. Dylan's breath caught, his eyes darted between the two women, but before he could say a word, Shen Yue stepped forward, her footsteps soft yet powerful. She stopped just close enough that Dylan could feel her presence, and then she leaned in, her lips barely moving, but her whisper pierced through everything. That one line, quiet yet devastating, shattered the room. Dylan froze, his heart thundering in his chest. Shen Yue's whisper was not loud enough for Bai Lu to hear, but the way Dylan's entire body stilled revealed its weight. It was not anger, it was not accusation, it was truth, sharp and inescapable. Bai Lu sensed it instantly, her hands trembled. She demanded to know what had been said, but Dylan could not repeat it. His eyes glassed over, his lips parted as if to explain, but no words came. It was as though Shen Yue had spoken the words he had long buried but never dared to admit. The tension snapped. Bai Lu's defiance cracked into visible hurt. Her shoulders sank, her voice wavered as she said she deserved to know. She had given years of herself. She had endured rumors, sacrifices, and silent nights, all for this moment. Yet Dylan's silence, paired with the impact of Shen Yue's whisper, left her standing in the ruins of hope. Dylan reached out, his hand trembling, but Bai Lu stepped back, her eyes glistening, and for the first time she seemed smaller, fragile, as if the strength she carried had been borrowed and now finally abandoned her. Shen Yue's expression remained calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm. She was not victorious. She was not smug. Her whisper had not been meant to wound. It was a truth she could no longer keep locked away, a truth Dylan could no longer deny. Bai Lu's lips quivered as she whispered back, asking him if it was true, if Shen Yue's words had truly been in his heart all along. Dylan's silence was the cruelest confirmation. He could not say yes, he could not say no, but his eyes spoke everything, and Bai Lu collapsed back into her seat, clutching herself as though she could hold together the pieces breaking inside. The weight of the moment pulled everyone into stillness. The world outside seemed distant, muted, as though time itself bowed to the confession unspoken yet undeniably present. Dylan finally broke, his voice hoarse as he tried to call Bai Lu's name, but it was too late. The line Shen Yue whispered had already etched itself into reality. Bai Lu stood, her steps unsteady but determined. She said she could no longer fight against what was already chosen, that sometimes leaving was not surrender, but survival, and with that she walked out, her silhouette trembling against the dim light, leaving Dylan and Shen Yue standing in silence. Dylan's knees weakened. He pressed his hand over his face, torn between guilt and relief. He could still feel Shen Yue's whisper in his ear, that one line echoing, haunting, reshaping everything. Shen Yue watched him, her own eyes glistening, but she did not move closer. She did not offer comfort, because she knew what she had done. She had released a truth that could not be undone, and now Dylan had to carry it. Whether it healed him or destroyed him, the night would never be forgotten. The whisper would never fade, and nothing between them would ever be the same again. The silence after Shen Yue's whisper did not last a second. It stretched endlessly, wrapping the room in a suffocating stillness as if the air itself was holding its breath. Dylan stood frozen, his eyes trembling, his lips parted, but unable to form a sound. Whatever Shen Yue had whispered was not just a simple sentence, it was a truth that cut deeper than anything spoken aloud before, and it forced Dylan to confront the very thing he had been avoiding for months. Bai Lu, however, was not ready to surrender. Her hands curled into fists at her side, her voice sharp as she demanded to know what Shen Yue had said. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the polished floor, the echo amplifying the tension. Her eyes were glistening, but she refused to let the tears fall, not yet, not in front of Dylan. She wanted to appear unshaken, but her heart was racing out of control, her chest tightening with every second Dylan refused to look at her. Shen Yue did not move. She simply stood near Dylan, her presence calm, her gaze fixed only on him. She knew Bai Lu's questions hung heavy in the air, but her focus was on the man who had just heard the words that could change his entire world. Dylan's breathing quickened, his chest rising and falling unevenly, and in that fragile state, Bai Lu reached for him, her fingers brushing against his arm. "Tell me," Bai Lu's voice cracked. "What did she say to you, Dylan? What did she whisper?" Her voice was trembling, half a plea, half a command, but Dylan still could not answer. He shook his head slowly, as if the truth itself was too unbearable to repeat. His silence was louder than any confession. Shen Yue's eyes softened, and in a voice almost too gentle to be heard, she finally broke the silence. "I only told him what he already knows. What he has always known." The weight of her words struck Bai Lu like thunder. Her body stiffened, her breath caught in her throat, and she took a step back, shaking her head in disbelief. "No. No, he does not know. You are lying." Dylan finally turned to her then, his eyes wet, the conflict in them impossible to disguise. He opened his mouth, his voice shaking. "Bai Lu, I cannot keep pretending. I cannot keep standing between you and her, as if my heart is not already screaming where it belongs." The words shattered the air, and Bai Lu's composure collapsed. She staggered, her knees threatening to give way, but she caught herself on the edge of the table nearby. Her face crumbled, and at last, the tears she had been holding back spilled freely down her cheeks. She stared at Dylan, her voice barely a whisper. "After everything, after all this time, you are choosing her." Dylan stepped toward her, reaching out as if to comfort her, but Bai Lu slapped his hand away. Her pain had hardened into anger, her voice breaking as she cried, "Do not touch me. Do not look at me with pity. If she had not whispered to you tonight, would you still have kept me here? Would you still have let me believe you loved me?" The question stabbed directly into Dylan's heart, and his silence was all the answer she needed. Shen Yue lowered her eyes, guilt flickering across her face, yet she stood her ground. She had not wanted to hurt Bai Lu, but the truth had demanded to be spoken. The room felt unbearably heavy, as though every corner was weighed down by their broken hearts. Bai Lu looked from Dylan to Shen Yue, her chest heaving as she tried to steady her voice. "I see it now. I was only ever the shadow, the one filling the space when you could not have her. And you let me believe." Her voice trailed off, and she turned away, hiding her face as the sobs finally consumed her. Dylan took one desperate step toward her, but then stopped, paralyzed by his own guilt. He could not deny her words, he could not erase the truth. Then suddenly, the door creaked open, and a figure appeared in the dim light of the hallway. It was Xiao Zhan. His eyes swept across the room, catching the sight of Bai Lu's trembling form, Dylan's broken stance, and Shen Yue's calm but pained expression. He did not speak at first, but the silence of his presence was heavier than any outburst. Everyone turned to him, waiting for his reaction, and when he finally spoke, his voice was sharp and steady. "So it is true. The choice has been made." His words struck like a blade through the fragile moment. Bai Lu's head snapped up, her eyes wide as she looked at him, as if hoping he might save her from the humiliation. Dylan lowered his gaze, ashamed, while Shen Yue straightened, ready for the storm that was about to break. Xiao Zhan stepped fully into the room, his eyes locking on Dylan with an intensity that froze everyone in place. You may think this is about love, Dylan. But the way you handled this, the way you let her suffer in silence, the way you let her fight for a place you already knew she did not have, that will never be forgiven. The silence that followed was suffocating, and the night was far from over.